Welcome to Dance Unscripted. I am your host, Amy Elizabeth. Today's episode, we are joined by Lydia Hance and Ashley Horn of Frame Dance, a hub for innovation in dance education. Lydia is a choreographer, curator, filmmaker, educator, and dance writer. She holds degrees in dance performance and English literature from Southern Methodist University, is the founder and artistic director of Frame Dance, and the chief curator of Frame by Frame Film Festival. Ashley is the director of curriculum and pedagogy at Frame Dance. She has been teaching dance with a focus on early childhood, neurodevelopment, and pedagogy for over 20 years in public schools, studios, and community centers, among many additional educational roles. We're going to take a deeper look into the future of education with Lydia and Ashley as they introduce Kinetic Classrooms, where movement is central to the learning experience, empowering children to reach their full potential academically, socially, and emotionally. Lydia, Ashley, thank you so much for joining us today on Dance Unscripted.
Hi. Thanks for having us.
Yes, this is, when I was looking over the material, I had this moment where I thought, yes, and duh. Because I feel like as dancers, we understand, as dancers and dance educators, we understand the power of movement in every aspect of our lives. And I feel like this is really such a practical, concrete way of finding its way back into the education system, if you will. So let's get started today. Lydia, can we begin with you and maybe a little history behind Frame Dance, how the organization grew from inception to this new initiative?
Sure. So in 2010, which seems so long ago now, I founded Frame Dance as a professional dance company. We made site-specific work. We did a lot of audience engagement and screen dance. And so I was thinking about accessibility in terms of audience and trying to connect essentially audiences to modern dance and ways to break that down, ways to make that exciting. And Frame Dance has really developed over time to a lot more, to include a lot more. So in about 2014, I started the Multi-Gen Ensemble, which was a performing group that worked separately from the professional dancers and included people of all ages and backgrounds. There were a lot of families who participated together, and I just fell in love with that process of looking at dance making from another angle and helping other people see themselves as dancers. And all the while, I think, like a lot of dancers and choreographers, we teach. And so kind of all along in the background, I had a teaching practice. And I really, it kind of plugged along, but like the dance making, I was also interested in where dance education could happen in different places. And so that just naturally opened up a lot of opportunities to teach in different places, community centers, public school, libraries, and one of the community partners that we still work with today, which is the Houston Area Women's Center. We work with the children in the shelter who are survivors of domestic and sexual abuse. And so we've looked at dance in just a lot of different contexts. And then, I kind of had this moment where, and through the pandemic, we danced outside. And along the way, I sort of started to connect the professional dancers and the multi-generational dancers, and then also start an early childhood dance program. And so we opened up our own brick and mortar studio during the pandemic, which was very exciting. But the right time for us, absolutely. We kind of took that risk, and then the program has just really developed from there. And as the program grew, I had had people start to ask me about sort of my vision for the education program. And, you know, one question I always talk about, which was always like the strangest thing to me, was like, do you have a Sugarland frame dance? I was no, like I would never, ever consider this a type of like, in my mind, never consider it like a chain or, you know what I mean? Like, you know, people ask questions, and it's great when people ask questions that I've never heard before, because, you know, we stay in our own kind of lane. But it got me thinking, like, where is the impact going to be? You know, I had that sort of like approach, you know, at my age, you know, like, what is my legacy? What's happening? What's the impact? And at that time, we were also teaching in a variety of schools around town, sending teachers out into schools. And I thought, that just doesn't feel, that's great and wonderful and meaningful to be taking our teachers and sending them out to places, but it just didn't seem right. And so with Ashley, who has been with Frame Dance all along the way, a founding member in the professional company, and has just been my collaborator from literally the beginning, in art making and in education, the first step really was, we want to train. We believe that the way that we're teaching children, the way that we're teaching adults, but the way that we're teaching children is innovative. It is based in research and a lot of experience in a variety of situations. Like, I think the way that we're going to make the most impact is by taking our pedagogy and perhaps our curriculum and teaching teachers to then go teach. And so it was a big, big project, developing teacher trainings and taking our studio curriculum and putting it to paper. But even there, and it was a lot of work, right? We have, you know, the family curriculum, the primary curriculum, the kinder curriculum. It's a lot of pages. It's a lot of information, a lot of work. And Ashley was very patient with me, and Carolina, who has helped, you know, doing the design of it all. And it took until like that was finished, and we went into like a visioning session, and a woman, Marianne Stone, came and she asked us this question, and she said, what is the future of education? And we wrote like all these really negative things. We had a very bleak idea of what the future of education was for children. And she said, but what if you can change that? And at that point, we were like, oh my goodness, you know, what if all of this information, what if all of these social emotional learning and outcome, what if all of this material were converted to a classroom, and the teachers were teaching to teach movement, are dance teachers, but the teachers were teaching to teach movement, are classroom teachers. And so that began Kinetic Classrooms.
Yeah. So you're talking about already being in the school systems and sending your teachers. So you've trained these teachers in your curriculum and you send them into the schools. Is this, they're in the actual day-to-day, or is this an after-school program or a special session that they go to outside of the classroom?
So we're actually preparing for the first pilot the first pilot in the fall. So the idea is that Kinetic Classrooms is not an add-on, but it is movement that flows with different components that we can certainly go into throughout the school day. That it is movement that is used to move, to start the day, that is the backbone of circle time. It is movement that helps with classroom skills. It is movement that helps children transition from room to room or from activity to activity. It is movement that we turn to with children when they are being introduced to language and literature.
But up to this point, what Frame Dance was offering in the classroom was not that inclusive. It was more of like a session outside of academia that happens throughout the day. Yeah. So exactly. Trying to frame this for the listeners of the transition between what was to the possibilities of what could be. Ashley, as the director of curriculum and pedagogy, at what point did the focus shift from a dance learning environment to the academic classroom. I mean, Lydia kind of talked on that. If you can talk about how this idea transpires as being, in the process of creating that curriculum.
Sure. Well, we wrote our studio curriculum, and then we had a few years where we would go into charter schools and public schools and do teacher trainings where we would talk about early childhood brain development and how it related to movement. And we would show them different ways to incorporate dance into their classroom. And when we get to the end of the session, every time, the things that the teachers wanted to talk about were classroom management skills, because I had touched on them earlier. Um, and I found that we have answers for all of these classroom management issues that they have through movement, because we have tested them in the studio, but because we know children are built to move and movement has such a profound impact on their developing nervous system, that we really thought, like, how can we, with this kind of like treasure chest of activities that we have built to help students be regulated and have all of these classroom skills, how can we give these to the teachers? And so we spent some time developing that, but then we also recognized that there was this kind of roadblock that we'd come up to where teachers would say, I'm not a dancer. And that statement it's so hard to overcome, because as adults, as a profession that is dominated by women, we are so critical of our body and what it does. And when we start asking people to dance and move, this like kind of introspection, this kind of like self-criticism starts. And so how can we help classroom teachers who may not have had like an extensive dance education, how can we help them feel comfortable and successful with a dance element in their classroom? So we developed Kinetic Classrooms, which is not something that they have to kind of search around and develop their own curriculum. It is a day-by-day schedule of movement activities that build upon each other so that they can learn classroom skills and concepts that support their academic pursuits like math and reading, that help develop their social emotional skills, that develop them physically, whether it's like their eye coordination, their gross motor movement, their fine motor movement, all of these things in a super easy day one, you do this, day two, you do this, so that there is like no confusion, no extra work. It's we really stepped away from ourselves as like dance educators and dancers, and we were like, how can we write this for people who are not people who have been in a studio, who have talked about dance a lot? How can we just write this in a way that is like accessible language to everybody? And that is where I think this is going to find success, because we have made it just the easiest thing that we recognize brings harmony and joy and like a classroom experience that is enjoyable and efficient for everybody.
This is exciting. I'm getting excited hearing about it. But there is something that you had mentioned earlier, this idea of the teacher themselves. I'm not a dancer. Part of my mission with this podcast and what I do here in Southeast Texas is helping our general community understand that if you are a moving, breathing being, you are a dancer, and that you understand what movement is. And you may not feel empowered yet because you don't have the language yet. And I feel like that's what you're doing for them, is creating this language for them so that they feel comfortable with something that they don't know they already know, or that they already have the baseline. And I think, yes, that is really important. And it goes beyond just the children's education, which is, yes, we're focused on the child's education, but the educator is the one who is propelling that forward. And they set the tone for the class, for the project, for the culture of that environment. And so empowering them, that's the part that really stood out to me, is yes, just scream, yes, yes, yes. But yes, for those who can't see, who are just listening, she was talking about, most people don't identify as dancers. I'm shaking my head back here. No. And we've actually come up with a term thus far. I've come up with a term for it, for non-identifying dancers. You don't identify as a dancer. And part of that identity is that it's not something that is that you're consciously aware of every day. and it's how we define movement. It's how we define dance. And I feel this has the opportunity to help kind of break outside that box and kind of push that forward a little bit, that we're all moving, breathing beings, and we can all benefit from this movement. And I'm interested to see the teacher's response to how they feel about themselves engaging in this movement, and also in the spontaneity and the creativity of the projects. That's so exciting. So we stated that the goal of Kinetic Classroom is to help the students feel more focused, emotionally grounded, and engaged, while supporting the teachers, easing their stress and preventing their burnout. But I'd like to focus first on the students' ability to focus and remain engaged. So can we give an example or an illustration of how Kinetic Classroom would enhance the students' experience, specifically through focus and remaining engaged?
Sure. We know that students, especially very young students, are asked now to sit still for longer and longer periods of time. And that just not agree with the way their brain works. And it has negative returns when you're asking them to just be so stationary. When we incorporate movement into the classroom in this really mindful way, in these exercises that are built to develop all of these intricate skills in the classroom, we are not only giving them a chance to kind of get their wiggles out, which is important, we're also like, what are their physical developmental needs? What do they need to be successful in the classroom right now? Well, they need oxygen in their brain. They need to move. They need to breathe. They need to see each other. They need to have these like tactile experiences where they're getting feedback from all their nerve endings. They need all of these things for their brain to be awake, for their brain to be engaged, for their brain to be risk taking. And we know that these things can help provide that for them.
You use the word risk taking. I'm not sure that I've heard adults say that they want the young children to be risk takers. And I think if I was a parent listening to this podcast, I would think, no, I don't want them to stand on the table. No, I don't want them to jump off the edge. So can you clarify or identify what this idea of risk taking is in this perspective?
Absolutely. Risk play is a vital part of childhood education. And it's something that I understand wanting to mitigate risk in a child's life. I'm a mom, Lydia's a mom, and I never want my kids to experience hurt or failure. But children learning about risk through their own experiences is so important for them understanding their life as an adult, arriving with all of this material and how to navigate an adult independent life. And so what we have done is we've built this structure, we've built these skills that these kids will practice in a scaffolded way so that when they take a risk, it's in a safe environment where they are assessing their own limitations, where they are self-monitoring, but they know that they can fail in safe ways. And then life goes on. So they have learned something about themselves. They've become resilient. They have taken a little risk, which wakes up parts of your brain that are associated with memory. And you hold on to things when those little parts of your brain where you take risks are activated. I could talk about this for a long time, but taking risks as a child, it develops a much more resilient, creative adult.
All right, you've used our keyword twice already, and I'm very excited about that. Talk to me more about this idea of they're becoming more resilient. So how does this show up in the young people that you're working with when you say, that's resiliency? How do you see it? How do you identify it?
I think it's just the abundance of opportunities for multiple answers and multiple ways of interpreting what we're asking them to do, while still really being able to also be following the directions. And I think that something that we talk about is mental friction and,
Mm-hmm.
just how easy it is to get information, um, how children are expected to do something correct or right, or whether it's a standardized test. Just everything is very, very binary. The pressure to get something right, or not to provide their own idea or option, or creative problem solving is, being taken away. Um, this idea of allowing children to struggle through through an idea is just, it's really important. Just in order to build their muscles and their strength in order to persevere to reach the
Mm-hmm.
place that they're getting to. They're just, they're growing up in an iPad world, and everything is very, very quick and very gratifying, very quickly. And so I think that is just a value that we have, and something that we believe that arts education integrated into a school day brings.
That's fantastic. So, Kinetic Classrooms is rooted, you say, in the latest research on brain development and child psychology. So, can we talk more about the research behind this program? And I know, like you just said, mental friction. I'm not sure that all of our listeners know exactly what mental friction is, or how you're identifying it in this way. But what is some of these research topics that are really being focused on in Kinetic Classrooms?
Well, we're really looking at a child's brain, where it is exactly when they're 3, exactly where it is when they're 4, exactly where it is when they're 5, because they're not just adult brains shrunk down. They're like a completely different working system, that it's a child's brain's goal and job in life is to grow. And
Mm-hmm.
so we are learning about all the different ways that they're growing, and we are building movement activities that directly support the growth of the child at that age.
Sorry, it froze and I got scared for a second, but that's okay. I gotta get back in it. Okay, so one thing that you just said is that the child's brain is not the adult brain, and I think that that's kind of the misconception here. Is I don't know exactly where a 3-year-old's brain is supposed to be, or a 4, or a 5, or a 6, but it is very much that the development stages up until the fully developed brain, which I believe they say something around in our 20s, is when we can actually start to make some really solid decisions. Um, and so I guess I'm curious as to what that looks like for a 3-year-old versus, let's say, an 8-year-old. I mean, I will, full confession, I used to be the director of preschool 3 to 5-year-olds. And I also just confessed that I don't know where a 3-year-old's brain needs to be at that particular time. So I can say that, I mean, yes, we were in the space together, and yes, it was more focused on a physical development and understanding how the body moves, but not really focused on how the brain and what the brain needs. So can we dive a little bit into that, on what are some of the differences, like I said, a 3-year-old versus an 8-year-old?
Sure. From birth to 5 is the fastest physical growth of a brain. And so a 3-year-old is physically putting the building blocks of their brain together. They're laying the roads, they're building the buildings. And so we're giving them kind of sensory information that helps them build the roadmap that they're going to use for their entire life. Whereas an 8-year-old, they're still doing that, but it has really slowed down. And now they're really refining, they're really
Mm.
learning more, they're making everything stronger that is already there. I mean, and it's there's bleed over. A 3-year-old is refining, an 8-year-old is still building. But as far as like the main goal,
Mm-hmm.
younger is building, older is refining.
I guess too, I'm curious because I said, like, when I was teaching preschool, I was mainly focused on the physical development and knowing my right foot from my left foot. And so the connection between the physical development and the mental development, I've read that there is a direct correlation between, in my Bartenieff studies, Armgard Bartenieff, and the development of the human physically, and it being associated and connected with the development of the brain. Where are we at there in finding that connection between the physical and the mental, psychological?
No.
Well, every time a young child initiates a movement, especially a novel movement that they've never done before, they build new neural pathways in their mind, and those pathways will exist. I mean, unless they're pruned for some reason, they will exist forever and they'll be in use as an adult. And so all of these movements are building a brain that is primed for creative problem solving and academic thinking for a whole life. And so this physical, it's so important. And I get really like passionate about it because it's so important for children to move around for their future success.
And do you
I think that,
oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say the element that I think is special about this is because we are working in early childhood, it is also where they are going through they're going a big distance in terms of their understanding a relationship to each other and their ability to interact in a classroom, where to have boundaries, how to stand up for yourself, where to be collaborative, what does play look like when you're 2 versus when you're 6. And so, a lot of what we're doing in the curriculum is helping really build, I keep saying classroom citizenship. I don't know. I feel like, it sounds like such like a dramatic term, but just who they are, in a classroom full of other little children and little minds with who are developing at such a rapid rate, and how are we supporting their relationship to one another in the classroom. And so you'll see activities in the curriculum where we're asking them to work together, or we're asking them to work in opposition, or we're asking them to work as a team, as a unit, how they're ways that they're sharing space or sharing levels, or following a formation in a line that kind of sit to support the class as it already is, but they're doing it from really a creative movement, mindful point.
Yes. I was just thinking that this took me, I teach in higher education. I do not teach young people on a regular basis anymore. And now I'm having this conversation. I have a lot of education to do before I go back to that. But being in higher education, we talk a lot in my classroom about understanding the role as a part of the whole and identifying the self, and then who the self is in this space, and then what the contribution is, what collaboration is. And I guess I'm highlighting my ignorance now, that as I didn't think about that being so important as a young person, I'm not thinking of a child asking the question, who am I and what is my place here? And that is something that I've grappled with for the majority of my adult life. And I've taken it on almost as a question of curiosity to keep myself in forward motion. Who am I? Who am I now? Who do I want to be now in this space, in this time? What is my contribution? What is my impact? But I mean, yeah, my eyes are large right now because my mind is blown at this idea that we're kind of asking ourselves these questions in a time where we're not consciously asking these questions, but that transactional from a 3-year-old to a young adult who's asking these questions and trying to teach that there, it's a little shifting is what it's doing. I mean, to quote the young people, mind blown. Like, wow.
Right.
It's incredible information that I don't think is relevantly accessible. But that also could just be from my lack of training and my lack of experience in the classroom.
I do think that we've noticed that there definitely is a deficit in education of dancers about the young child, and that there's a deficit in education for educators about movement. Like there's, yeah, absolutely. Those are definitely two spaces that we want to support. But yeah, I mean, it's just like Ashley said about, you know, making the connections and making the roadways for things like cutting using scissors, or you're holding a pencil or whatever that is, you know, all those. There's also all those ways of establishing relationship with others. It's also really formative early on, and you'll see, you know, in the Texas State education standards for early childhood that, you know, the who am I of it, you know, the social emotional, or even it kind of makes sense. You know, do you remember bringing boards of pictures of your family in and talking about your family in the classroom? Just this idea of like, who am I? Where do I come from? When I leave my family, who am I in relationship to these other people, you know, and just really supporting a sense of confidence and celebration for each child's unique contribution to a classroom.
So you've reported in your information with Kinetic Classroom that since 1990, creative thinking scores in children have dropped sharply, especially in imagination and emotional expression. So we know that the studies in the arts is, you know, in this case, dance, make space for self-expression. And so I'm curious to understand what the potential is on emotional regulation that then develops into classroom management.
Yeah. Will you ask that question one more time?
Yes. I'm curious about the potential for emotional regulation. I think right now we have a large number of young people being diagnosed with different things, needing different environmental situations. And so I'm curious as to the potential of this program to assist with emotional regulation. And I think that with emotional regulation is going to enhance that classroom management that we're talking about. So if you can take me down, what is the potential of emotional regulation that leads into classroom management?
I think movement is inherently regulating, and we have built these exercises to explore different concepts, but also have an energy arc that brings you back to regulation at the end. And so, just on a physical aspect, we're helping regulate a child's nervous system, which is still developing, which is still kind of, working out some kinks. But in another sense, in another layered way, we are we're asking them to notice themselves in a neutral way, which is children. It is hard for them to notice themselves, and it is hard for them, especially now, to be neutral about themselves. So we're asking them questions about noticing themselves, noticing their body, noticing how it's moving, noticing their feelings, noticing their emotions. And so the first step in regulating your emotions is knowing what your emotions are. You can't address something if you don't know what it is. So we're asking kids to really think about what's happening inside of their mind right then, inside of their body right then. And then, well, what can we do to change that? We give them the tools to, well, what does it feel like when you do this? What does it feel like when we take this next step, when we take a breath? What does it feel like when we move really big? What does it feel like when we move really small? What does it feel like when we move alone versus together? We're just asking them all these questions about how they are feeling in the moment. And the more information that they can learn about themselves, and the more information that they can learn about the fact that they are in control of themselves, the more that they can then help regulate their emotions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think also, or alongside this, part of the curriculum is kind of re-looking at how we're asking teachers to ask for students' attention. And, I think there's a lot of eyes on me, or bubble in the mouth, or listen up, or turn on your listening ears. And, these things obviously have been going on for a long amount of time. But when we start asking teachers and giving teachers options to teach children to listen with their whole bodies, it changes the game a little bit. It's not just a disconnected eyes on something while their body is moving somewhere else. We're asking them to, the children to focus with their whole body. Being ready to do something, being ready to listen is a full body experience.
Yes, I mean, movement is a whole body experience. I just had this conversation at some point this week about how important it is for us to come as a whole person into each and everything that we do. But there is a vulnerability that comes to that comes with that, is, and the feedback that we're going to get and how we receive feedback, and the practice of this from such a young age. It almost makes me wish that I would have had that same practice at a young age, because we know that practice makes progress. And the more that you're able to experience something, the more that it can become, for lack of better words, ingrained or embedded in your person. And then it's not, oh, now I'm being vulnerable. It's like, now I'm stepping up and I'm showing up as my whole person, and that's okay. And I feel safe in this moment. And I believe it was Ashley who mentioned that idea of being able to do this in a safe way, being able to do it or I believe the word was neutral. And so often, especially in the dance world right now, this word of safety is really prevalent and coming up, and creating a safe environment for the students. And I know it's not directly connected with Kinetic Classroom, but can we speak to that just a little bit, on educators of all ages, and maybe how we create a neutral environment no matter the age of our students?
I think just what you said, practice makes progress. And so we began with our youngest dancers, neutral noticing. So if we have an exercise where we have audience practice, I will say, what did you see? And so they don't give us an opinion. We don't ask for, I like this, I like this. We say, what did you see? And so from a young age, they start giving neutral feedback. And then, when they get a little bit older, we start asking them to give neutral feedback about themselves. What did it feel like? Not did you do good or did you do bad, but just what was that like? And whatever their answer is, just accepting it and letting that be their experience.
Yeah, and praising the effort, not the outcome. I mean, not that that's a bad thing, but like the bulk of the positive affirmation being in the work, or in the work, essentially, is and not tying praise to an outcome.
Yes. So my next question kind of is in line with that idea of how can our listeners, whether they be young parents or educators of any age, really incorporate these ideas into their routines and their activities?
Yeah, so the pilot will be, the first round of the pilot will be this fall, and then after that we are opening. We will probably accept another a larger cohort of. I mean, it could be homeschool, but other schools or teachers, or if a parent is hearing this and is like, this needs to be in my child's classroom.
Yes.
We're absolutely gonna have that possibility. So at this point, it's really just reaching out to us to get in touch with teachers and schools, and advocacy on the part of the parent for the children in the classroom, or even for the benefit of the teacher to the administration, is really, really important. So yeah, we are just gonna keep rolling and keep growing the number of schools who can use this. Yeah, till it's all over. We think it should be in every classroom.
It should be in every classroom. I mean, I'm sitting here thinking, I wish that this was around for the young lady who was often reported to be talking too much, who couldn't sit still, to the point where, you know, is she actually going to be a successful adult? Let's identify this at 5 years old. Is she going to be a successful adult? We don't know, because she can't sit still and she can't be quiet and she can't focus. So I would like to think that I'm a successful adult. Mm-hmm. And I still have all of these attributes. Just
oh my God. Yes. And you are not alone. That is a common story. Like, there are a lot of people who that was what happened in the classroom. Absolutely. I think it's a fairly small percentage of children who can really really sit still.
Well, and my question is, if they're sitting still, are they actually focusing? Are they actually paying attention? Because when I'm sitting still, I am completely checked out. I have no idea what you're saying. And that's just how that works. And I just, yes, I say yes to all of this. I approve of this mission and this vision. Let's see how we can get this into every classroom and save all the little wiggles. Save the wiggles. For lack of better terms, is save the wiggles. Like, let them wiggle. That should be our tagline. Oh.
Yes.
Okay, so here in season 1, we are focusing on resilience. And I know we touched on this just a moment ago, but I want to go more specific with it. And we are really focused on dance's role in this idea of developing resilience. So would you say that the Kinetic Classroom curriculum has the potential to encourage resilience in these young academics? And if so, do you have a specific example or tool?
I think it develops resilience by asking them to try things, and to when they try something, if it didn't have the outcome that they want, talk about that. Was that outcome exciting? If you didn't like that outcome, let's just try it again. And so just getting in that the excitement of being a person who's trying something, and letting that be something that is like, you know, gets you excited and not afraid.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's something about because, and this is probably true for a lot of the art world, or at least the creating art world, the creation portion of it, is that, like, we're not asking for an outcome. We're asking for the process and the attempt. And so, like, there literally is, I mean, you know, if they're following the directions and they're doing anything within the rainbow of the directions, they're being successful. And there is not, you know, their 5 is not backwards. You know what I mean? It's not, they're not holding their scissors upside down and being told that they're wrong. It's like, who knows what doing X, Y, and when we're asking doing X, Y, and Z should look like. And so the wrongness of something is not hanging over them. It's just potential and joy.
There is no right answer. That is something that I've actually learned recently and been in conversations about, is this idea that you can't be wrong. You can make a clear choice. But the reality is that you actually don't know whether the other choice was right or not, because you cannot predict the outcome. And so if there is no right choice, what does that do for the person who is making a decision? What does that do for them? And I think for me, it's this idea of allowance and permission, which then creates possibility. And is that not what creativity is? How would
it's an invitation to wonder. You know, it's an invitation to wonder.
And that's what our young people should be doing. They should be wondering. They should be investigating, exploring, discovering, or at least that's what I wanted to do as a young person. So there's one more question on here that said, where or in what moments have you seen examples of resilience in a young student? Like, can you give a specific moment that you thought this young person has just overcome this, pushed through this, bounced back from this?
I think in my littlest students, what I see that is so joyful to me is when I have a young kid and they try something and it didn't work the way they wanted to, or the outcome was different than they expected, and they look at me and they have this like kind of like smile and they're like, I'm gonna do that again. Or like they can accept the fact that whatever outcome they got wasn't their expectation, and they accept it joyfully, and they know that it's a safe place to try again or to try again next week. And with that, when I have a little student that is like tenacious, they try something, they try something, they try something, and then one day it works, and they can connect the fact that it's because they tried it so many times that it then worked for them. So they know that they are in charge of that progress for themselves.
Yeah. I think for me, when I'm observing a child, in the frame dance world, attempt to do something and it doesn't really happen the way that I think that they want to do it. And as an observer, like my instinct is like, oh, like I sometimes, to be perfectly honest, have to remember not to step in. I really have to have a guard up and allow that process to happen naturally. But then when something does not go right, where I think that I kind of grew up in a world where I was like really upset myself for that not happening. And I see a child like be like, whoa, huh, like surprised, or like, like not a negative, like there's not a negative. Yes. It's like a fine thing that just happened, and then they just try it again, and to be like, oh my goodness, like what a gift it is that we have this information that we can teach in a way that does not provide that weight, that heaviness of the learning process.
Yeah, I've heard the word joy spoken a couple of times, and honestly, that's what young people are. They are joy, and they are the curious, we're encouraged to keep a childlike mind. We're encouraged to stay youthful and young and spirited. And I think it's because even as adults, we crave that joy, that just relentless, unfiltered joy. And I think it is so brilliant that we now have these tools that we can use, that we can bring in, instead of the teacher saying, I don't know how to do this. It's like, well, here you go. Here are some tools that you can use that can empower the educational environment, encourage the students, and support them beyond just the subject at hand. I think that's really incredible. So on behalf of everyone, thank you. Thank you for bringing this tool and this resource to us. And Lydia, Ashley, thank you so much for taking the time to share your research. And it is empowering to see the potential of dance in a more direct relationship with children's education and development. And with that, we are coming to the end of our conversation together. And this is where we put you in the hot seat. We call this our rapid round, where we are asking all of our guests to complete these 2 sentences. So I'll start with sentence 1. Resilience is.
Resilience is vital.
That's a better word. I was going to say essential, but so I'll do something different. I'll say it's grit.
I haven't heard that one. I enjoy it. The second sentence is, dance has taught me.
Dance has taught me about my relationship to the world.
Dance has taught me to give myself grace.
These are so beautiful. Thank you both so much again for giving your time, giving your energy, and bringing this new information to us here at Dance Unscripted. It has been a pleasure.
Thanks for having us.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you for joining us for Dance Unscripted, presented by Aim to Dance. And thank you to Lydia and Ashley for the incredible work they are doing to help our little citizens make the most of their experiences and find success in all aspects of their development. You can find more about Frame Dance and Kinetic Classrooms at framedance.org or on social media at Frame Dance. We will link this information in our show notes as well. Be sure to click the subscribe button and share with a friend or colleague. If you enjoyed this episode, give us a review on Spotify for a chance to win Dance Unscripted merch. We know that you could have chosen any other platform. You chose us, and you chose dance. And for that, we are incredibly grateful. Season 1 of Dance Unscripted is brought to you by the Lamar University Center for Resiliency.